Okay, and we are live. Welcome to a new episode of All Things Xbox Podcast. Once again, I have Logan with me. Logan, how are you doing?
Doing good, Jamie. Doing good. How about you, man?
I'm good. As people may know, we didn't have a show last week because the internet went down for the entire country. Even people like Tyson Fury was complaining on Instagram. It was pandemonium. Everyone was talking about it. Although, if people could talk about it because the internet was down. But anyway, we're back this week. It's been a good week. We have a lot of news to cover. A lot of stuff that happened over TGS. A lot of stuff that happened the past week. But before we get into all that, Logan, have you been playing anything interesting?
Yeah, I just wrapped my first playthrough of Starfield. Got over 100 hours in for my first playthrough, and did pretty much all the side quests I could find. Did all the factions, main quest. Loved it. It incredible game. I'm gonna do New Game Plus, but I'm taking a break because once you plow through a game like that, like I don't know about you, but like I'm someone that kind of needs like a palate cleanser or a little bit of a reprieve from a big RPG.
Yeah.
So I've gone back to Quake 2 and I'm wrapping up the last expansion on that and then I'll hop into something else again.
Yeah, you know what? I get that. Like, especially with how big these RPGs are getting. I always go to linear shooters after like an open world RPG. I think people should really try that more. So like Starfield is it's 1,000 open worlds. So when I've finished, I'm gonna play the most linear game I can find, probably a Call of Duty title. And then again, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 is right around the corner. And I noticed in chat while we're talking about Starfield, 13K1 Production said, hello everyone, I have one question. Jamie, which did impress you more so far, Starfield or Mass Effect? Look, that's a bit of a weird question for me. I have to say Mass Effect. Not because, like, Starfield's more impressive on a scale of what you do and where you go, but for me, Mass Effect is all about the universe, the themes, the characters. Starfield, it's all about the world, whereas in BioWare's games like Mass Effect and Dragon Age, the game world you're playing is more of an afterthought. It's more about the characters. So Liara, Miranda, Garrus, Rex, everyone, Morden Solus, Thane, Kratos, everyone. Like, those are the stars of the show. Whereas on Starfield, you see people posting pictures and videos of walking on these beautiful worlds with these great sunsets and stuff. But in Starfield, it's not really about the characters. So, like, for me, Mass Effect's always going to be number one. But then again, when I finish the game and do New Game Plus or whatever it's called, that might change. I doubt it, but I think Starfield, for me, when it's all said and done, it's probably going to be in my top 5 favorite games of all time, which is saying a lot. I see on Twitter at the minute people are posting these lists of like their favorite games of all time, and I've been thinking about doing a top 100 favorite games of all time video, which would be like an hour long. I might still do that at some point, but yeah, Starfield special. It is. I can't really compare it to Mass Effect, but that's been the question for a while. What's better, Mass Effect or Starfield? And it's like, look, people have been listening to me long enough that I'm always going to choose Mass Effect. The trilogy, I loved it. Like, it's simple as that, really. But other than that, I've basically only played Starfield. A little bit of Sea of Stars. I think the problem for a lot of gamers these past few weeks and month is that Starfield came out just after a bunch of game releases. So you had Immortals of Avon, Armored Core 6, Sea of Stars, Everspace 2, and then Starfield dropped like 2 weeks later or a week later. So people are wondering, where did he divide the game in time? Which for me is a bit of a pain. I've been wanting to play Lies of P for 2 years now, and I've played a little bit. I have been enjoying that. It has kicked my behind. When it comes to those types of games, I play with a shield and a sword, right? If people ever get bored and want to see something different, every single boss fight in Elden Ring I've beaten, I have it recorded in a video on the channel. It's like 2 hours long. It's every single boss in Elden Ring. But you'll notice that I use the same sword and shield throughout the entire game, because that's how I play. But in Lies of P, you don't have a shield, which means I'm terrible. Speaking of Lies of P, we have the first super chat of the day by Nick W for $4.99. Thank you very much. He says, Lies of P is awesome. I'm close to the end. That's great to hear because I'm stuck on the bridge with the dude with the rabbit mask. I'm crap at parrying in games. I play a lot of Souls-style games. I played The Surge, Lords of the Fall, and all that stuff. Dark Souls, Elden Ring, those games I can play because I have a shield. I'm terrible at parrying in games. Terrible. I'm atrocious. And in fact, next week's episode, I'll post gameplay of Lies of P, where you'll notice how terrible I am. I'm awful. Terrible. One day I'll finish it. I'm determined to finish it, but when it comes to parrying in games, big no-go for me. I'm awful. But yeah, thank you very much for the $4.99, Nick W. Logan, have you played Lies of P yet?
I played through the demo, but I haven't played the game release yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult, but I think that's kind of the point with that type of game. It has some quality of life features I think the genre really needs. Just the fact that you can... It's not too far apart for save points or the shrines that you have in Dark Souls and all that stuff. But yeah, I highly recommend people play it. Unfortunately, the demo got delisted, which is a thing developers do with demos now for some reason. I don't know why they do that, but hey, it's in Game Pass. Highly recommend people try it. And you know what? We've got a lot to go over. Let's go over the topics. I think a lot of gamers are going to be happy about this one. We've had microtransactions in video games for a very long time. Going back to the horse armor in Oblivion, and then throughout later Xbox 360 games, we were getting things like microtransactions in Dead Space 3, which really annoyed people. And then I carried on towards last generation. And then this past generation, I'll say the past 2 or 3 years, developers have been messing around with putting NFTs in video games. And that's annoyed a lot of people like me, like you listening, like Logan. We don't want that in games. We want to buy our game and just play it. And NFTs is another way to scam us, basically. Well, it turns out the NFT market completely crashed. Tens of millions of dollars worth of NFTs are worth about a handful of dollars total. So I think all that Web3 stuff and NFTs and video games, Sega have said they're going to move away from NFTs. It looks like Square Enix may move away from NFTs. Ubisoft don't care anymore about NFTs. I think as gamers, it's something we don't have to worry about now, because we have to pony up $70 now for these massive games now, or even smaller games, in a time where people have less money than ever. And then at the same time, some developers want to push these NFTs where they don't mean anything at the end of the day. The whole market's crashed, and it's beautiful. Logan, what do you think? Because I'm happy.
Yeah, I'm glad that went away, to be honest. On the surface, I think it's fun in some industries, kind of like the trading card type thing in basketball. There was Top Shot for NBA fans and stuff like that. But in general, I'm just not a big NFT guy at all, especially in gaming. And I'm glad it's fading away. And, the less of those concerned ape accounts I have to see, the better. So it's good.
Yeah, I mean, on this channel, especially in the podcast, we do mention the price of games a lot because it's been a big point for a lot of people. Now more than ever, we asked for $70 or £70 for games, and especially in a time when demos are less of a thing, there's a big risk for video games now, and especially in an age where I feel like everything's the same. I think putting in an extra monetization option for people is just the dumbest thing ever. I've never once bought a microtransaction ever. I refuse to buy microtransactions. Not going to happen. And then when developers were pushing this for a few years, Ubisoft especially, they were the big ones, because they were like, hey, if you get this helmet in, let's say, Ghost Recon Breakpoint, you're going to be able to carry that forward to these other games and sell it to other people. And then after 2 months, they dropped the entire program and stopped development of the game. And yeah, I love it. I love the fact that everything's crashing. Nick W, once again, thank you very much for the 199 super chat. He says, I'm glad crypto and NFTs have crashed. Sober. It's like, look, there's people that are invested into crypto and all that stuff, and like, good for them if they can enjoy it. But like, it doesn't need to be in gaming, right? We don't need that here. Whenever I see a developer on Twitter with a Web3 in their profile picture, or like in the bio, I instantly block them because we don't want any of that stuff. If it's meant to be the next evolution or form of the internet, shouldn't it happen naturally rather than trying to force it? We've had metaverses in games before. PlayStation's Home, that was a metaverse. GTA 5 is a metaverse. But you have these developers that work for like Facebook and all these other companies that want to push this thing that we've had for years, but they want to give it a different name and charge us even more than we pay now, when we are paying more for games than we ever have. And before anyone ever says, but we paid $90 or £90 for games in the 90s, that's because games were in expensive cartridges. That's the only reason games were expensive then. And now we get charged $70 for a game that may be broken at launch. Remember how games never used to be broken? Well, now we pay more.
Put them in, play them.
Yeah, like I remember in the 360 generation, I think it was Battlefield 3. I put the disc in, and it asked me, it told me I needed a 3 megabyte update. 3 megabytes. And at the time, I was thinking, what's this, an update? It was done in a few seconds, but at the same time, like look how far we've come. We get patches the size of games now, and if you buy a game on disc, chances are you're not going to be able to play it straight off the disc because there's a patch about the same size of the game. And hey, NFTs and all that stuff, it's crashing. I love it. It's a beautiful thing. Anyway, let's move on to some more positive stuff. Actually, we've got more negative stuff, but this is I think this is going to bounce back a bit. So, Unity, the game that's on the game engine that's used a lot, right? I checked the list after the last show. There's a lot of popular games that use that engine. So Fall Guys, I think that has like 50 million downloads. There's a game in Game Pass right now I think everyone needs to try. It's called Valheim. It's a Viking-inspired craft and survival game. I really enjoy it. I need to get back to it. But there's these massive games on mobile and console that use Unity. And the pricing structure they wanted to do was charge developers 20 cents per install, which is bloody ridiculous. And, they kind of backtracked it a bit. They said, look, we messed up. This is the actual thing. But it kind of put the charge of installs of games that will be in Game Pass or PlayStation now onto Sony and Microsoft. Now, I can imagine Microsoft and Sony were not happy about this. So, let's look at Among Us, right? Among Us is only about $2 to $3. Millions of people can download that. So if people are having to pay 20 cents per install, that's a large chunk of the money they're making after Microsoft and Sony take their cut. So, they would have been completely screwed. And millions of people have downloaded that. Anyway, Unity, they were trashed for a week and a half. And they finally put out a statement saying they messed up. They're going to revert things back. Honestly, if I was a developer, I would still move my game to something like Unreal Engine or Godot, because what happened 2 weeks ago was bloody ridiculous. That is potentially industry destroying stuff, and not a lot of people are covering it because it's not really an interesting topic on the front of it. But a lot of games we do play are Unity. And a lot of games, there's 300 to 500 games in Game Pass. I want to say maybe 200 of them are Unity. So, thankfully they've backtracked a little bit. Honestly, I would change engines because they've kind of ruined themselves. If you're a developer, how do you trust them anymore? Logan, what do you think of the whole situation? Because Unity kind of destroyed themselves.
Yeah, it was a colossal self-own. boils down to some math guys in the finance department and are like, hey, this is a way to make even more money off of something without having to do much. And they brought it up, and everybody's like, oh, okay, cool. But then it's like, wait a minute, like, who all approved this? And like, did you publicly test this or survey this or whatever? Because clearly the developers were not down for this, and consumers are like, wait a minute, I'm gonna be royally screwing over these brands and these games if I do this. And it was a colossal disaster. And the first game that came to mind was Genshin Impact, because
Oh
that's
yeah.
on Unity, and that has just an absolutely mind-numbing amount of downloads. So, and it's a free-to-play game. So imagine a company having to shell out a ton of money for a game that's quote free to play. Like that, it was just such a disaster in PR that the damage is done. They may revert things. They may say they're not going to do it anymore. But I really don't see people trusting them at all going forward.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned Genshin Impact, and I noticed Jez on Twitter mentioned that like millions of people play that game. So like, and it's free. I think that if that whole thing went forward, a lot of Unity developers would go under because 20 cents doesn't sound like a lot, but per install. So let's say if you have a console, a PC, and a Steam Deck, and a mobile device, and you put Genshin Impact on all of them, but you're just one person, like that was just shady. Thankfully, they backtracked a little, and almost immediately, Unity, I should say Unreal Engine, they put out a tweet showing how to convert files from Unity to Unreal Engine. But yeah, basically what Unity did that day is they made Unreal Engine a lot of money. Like a
I
lot of
know
money.
Tim Sweeney should send them a gift basket, honestly.
Yeah, and I did notice the developers of Terraria, by the way, they make bank off Terraria. They given like $100,000 between two different engines, Godot and something else, which is really cool. And I think $20,000 per year for 5 years. I can't remember what it was, but it was something like that. But it was really cool of them. They basically said, look, like they have the money to do it. So like, good on them. Apparently the Terraria developers have wanted to move on to other stuff, but they've literally said people keep buying our game. So like, hey, if they can afford it, why not? But yeah, but if you look at all the free-to-play games, and like you said, Genshin, there's the smaller priced games like Among Us, which millions of people play. I play Fall Guys. I think like 50 million people have downloaded it. So, oof, like I can't imagine the amount of money they. The thing is, like, it's not on Unity to deserve the money for it, right? Unity and the developer enter into a contract and they get X amount of money if the game makes like over 200 grand or $1 million or something like that. Like that's a contract, and like they wanted more money. Like scummy company, really scummy. And it turns out John Riccatello, I think that was his name, used to work for EA. Now, when he worked for EA, this is the beautiful part. He wanted to charge in Battlefield in game per reload, per magazine.
You better be a good shot.
Yeah, like, and if that's me, and like in the past Battlefield game, I'd be charged a lot because I reload after firing 3 bullets. Right, like people have commented when I post clips on Twitter, like, why do I reload all the time? Because I do. But like I'd be in debt in real life if they put that into effect. And literally 2 weeks before the Unity thing came out, he sold all of his shares. I'm not saying he's insider trading, but it kind of looks that way. You know, your company that you're the CEO of is going to make a disastrous, decision and announce it on Twitter, and you sell your shares 2 weeks beforehand. That's a bit sus. I'm not gonna lie. I'm saying allegedly because he may have just sold them on a whim. But yeah, Unity, they can go screw themselves. And the sad thing is, there's some really good games made in that engine. I talk about Hard Space Shipbreaker all the time. It's in Game Pass. Incredible game, absolutely incredible game. It looks great, performs great. In fact, it's one of the most impressive games this new generation. But yeah, we'll move on. Unity can screw themselves. Anyway, I see that Immortals of Avon, the developers, they fired half the staff. I feel sorry for them. It's an interesting new IP. I think the problem with that game is that it launched a few days within Armored Core and about a week and a half before Starfield. And honestly, I think that's a hard game to market, right? You have this single-player, first-person shooter using magic, which is a really interesting premise. But I thought some of the marketing for that game was atrocious. Like, if you have a fantasy IP with dragons and magic, you should have, a classical orchestra do the trailers, do the music of that game. But one day, I just heard a trailer pop on TV, and it was an Immortals of Avon trailer with rap music. Now, this is my same issue with this is my same issue with having like rock music during the Dungeons and Dragons trailer. It just doesn't fit. You're meant to have classical music and or opera with like fantasy. It just doesn't work. The trailer was bad for it, but like everyone I've spoken to that's played it, I've got it. I just haven't played it yet. But like everyone says it's good, and it's just a shame. It's a new IP that basically it was killed at launch. It's just a shame. It's something we're going to see throughout this generation because that was a AAA developer taking a risk. And, like, marketing can kill something. I've talked about this before. Blade Runner 2049. Everyone talks about how good that film is. Do you know that film bombed at the box office? Because it's crap trailers, right? The trailers for that film just showed you these wide shots of Ryan Gosling looking off into spaces. It became a meme. Ryan Gosling looking at things. And that film, people went into it not knowing what it was about. Like, if you go back and watch the trailers now, you don't know what that film's about. It's just Ryan Gosling is looking at a book. He's looking at Anna de Amas. Oh, what's this? He's looking at a hover car. Like, he's just looking at stuff. You can't tell what the film's about, so nobody went to see it. And to me, it's my favorite film of all time. It's got an interesting story, premise, everything about it's beautiful. And the same things happen with Immortals of Avon. It's crap trailers. Absolutely crap trailers. You can have an amazing game and have crap trailers. Like, that's the unfortunate thing. I just think it's sad that you have this new AAA developer. They make something interesting, and it releases right before Starfield and just before Armored Core, and half the studio shuts down. It's sad. It really is, because it means we're going to see even less risk from developers. Like, I complain about all these games being the same. Everything we play is the same, almost, right? And we're just going to see less risks because stuff like this, that was EA taking a risk. And we're not going to see any more games like this, and it's sad. Logan, what do you think? Because, I know you probably haven't gotten to it yet, but like the fact that it released just before Starfield and literally a few days within Armored Core, and half the studio's gone.
Yeah, this is something we've harped on a lot on this channel, that for some reason, some companies just do not learn their lesson about scheduling games, and they keep putting new games or kind of niche genres or things that are kind of similar to other titles that are coming out in the same period in bad slots. And then the game does poorly, and they're like, well, that sucks. Oh well, guess we won't do a sequel or this or that, or oh, now the studio's gonna have to cut funding and fire or lay off half the staff and readjust, and it sucks. I mean, it's business, but it sucks. Like, this is a game I think would have benefited from Game Pass. Who knows if they had reached out to him or talked to him about it, but I think this is the type of game that would do well on it. Take a risk, try it. And it was the closest thing we've had to Hexen in ages, so it's a bummer. I'm going to play it, but I really feel for the studio, and it doesn't help EA's, graveyard of studios' reputation.
Yeah, like you were saying, the timing of it, like Titanfall 2 was killed the day it released, and that was because it released literally smack dab in the middle of Call of Duty and Battlefield, like two behemoths in the first person shooter space, and it was just put out to die. Now, I've gone on about how crap I think Titanfall 2's multiplayer is compared to the first game, but its campaign, Titanfall's campaign is one of the, it's brilliant. It's one of the best first person shooter campaigns there is, but the game was sent out to die. EA just does not know how to schedule games. They just don't. They got lucky with Dead Space Remake. I honestly think that Immortals of Avon should have been left for, like, January or February, because that seems like a really good time for that type of game. But man, like Armored Core had a lot of like hype going into it, because From Software has millions of fans now that never played anything before Elden Ring. So this new mech game comes out and it has that From Software logo on it, and then there's millions of people looking at thinking, wait a minute, I like their game. So all eyes were on Armored Core for August. So yeah, it's a shame. Hopefully we can see more games in the future from that studio, but like some of these studios, they have to get better with timing. They really do. Like, I predicted Alan Wake 2 was going to get delayed till late October. I was right, thankfully. That game has a chance now. A game got delayed a few hours ago called Banishers Ghosts of New Eden. That's got delayed till February, which it needed to be. I think that came out a day before Call of Duty. So
it would have been eaten alive.
Yeah. And that's a single-player, third-person action-adventure game. Like, you cannot release a day before COD. You just can't. In the UK, I pay attention to the charts a lot, and like Call of Duty just demolishes everything. It just does. You have FIFA that's at the top. GTA is still in the top 10 constantly, and you can't be a new IP releasing a day before COD. A lot of people say that sometimes there's never any games throughout the year. I think it feels like that because sometimes there's months between big releases, and then you have all these developers, they want to squeeze all these games into October and November, and then like late January, February. It's like, we have other months, There's other months they can release in. But yeah, hopefully the studio bounces back. It's just sad. Anyway, we'll move on. We have some good news here. So the Tomb Raider Remaster Trilogy got announced on the Nintendo Showcase. And it was one of those things where it's made by Aspyr, and the notification went out late for the Xbox version. So immediately, I was watching the Nintendo thing. I put out a post saying it's coming to Xbox. And after about 10 minutes, I deleted the post because I was like, oh, this is Aspyr, But then I got the press release. So, the Tomb Raider Remaster Trilogy, it's coming to Xbox. The 3 original games. And the cool thing about this trilogy is that other than being able to go back to old and new visuals whenever you want, there's going to be new style controls as well as an option. So if you remember, the original Tomb Raider games basically had tank controls, a bit like Resident Evil. Well, in this, it's going to have modern controls, which is really cool. The really, really cool thing about it is that, Logan, did you ever play the original Tomb Raider games?
Yes, I played one of them on the original PS2, and I love the Tomb Raiders. Like, the reboot is obviously one of my favorite trilogies, so I definitely want to go back and play the original ones.
Yeah, well, back then, we had low poly counts on games, so characters were made of like 6 polygons, but you kind of accepted it at the time. Well, the really cool thing is that the Lara Croft that you see on the game cover and in the FMV sequences, you'd never actually see that character model in the game because it was like too much of a high polygon count. Well, what they've done with this game, this trilogy, is that for each game you actually play as the character model from the cover, which we've never had before. So it's literally going to be the most purest Tomb Raider trilogy experience. And like I'm always talking about, like, people should be playing old games, like try older things out. It's all about game preservation. And by the way, we're going to talk about game preservation in a bit, about how some people are hypocrites. But Tomb Raider trilogy, it's getting remastered. They're doing the best thing possible for us. It comes out in February, and I believe the game's only going to be like $25 or something like that.
That's a steal.
Oh, sorry, $38.99. I say here by Mr. Glass. But still, that's really cheap for 3 games where you can go back and forth between stuff. I think it's cool we're getting these remaster trilogies. We're going to get the Gex the Gecko trilogy at some point, which, like, those games look terrible. like, but I'm going to buy them still. Even if they're not even like, if they don't look better, I'm still going to buy them. Like, I loved Gex the Gecko as a kid. But yeah, Tomb Raider, it's coming to modern platforms, and it just shows that we can see games by Aspyr if they're called remaster. I've complained about this enough on Twitter. People need to let them know that the reason why we don't see their Star Wars games on Xbox is because we have ports of them already on Xbox. So if they literally just called them remasters, they'd be coming over as well. That's why we don't have the widescreen version of KOTOR. That's why we don't have the widescreen version of, a Jedi Outcast. All that stuff. But yeah, hey, cool stuff's coming. Can't wait. Anyway, just thought I'd throw that in there. You know what? We might as well talk about this now. So, today, Digital Foundry came out and said that developers are purposefully not putting in the extra effort in with the Series X version to use the extra power to force parity. When you see games that are basically, it's 1-to-1 exactly the same on Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5, like, something's up. We've seen out of various documents over the past 18 months due to the ABK deal that Sony has paid developers such as like Resident Evil 8 for parity. So developers can't squeeze the extra power out of the Series X for maybe a higher resolution, better textures, better filtering, better frame rate. They can't do that because they are locked into a contract to not use that power. And I can't stand this parity stuff, right? And it just seems like Microsoft can't get a win. So, like, Microsoft launches the Xbox One. It's weaker than the PlayStation 4. And developers are just allowed to make better versions for the PlayStation 4 because it's more powerful. And then when the One X came out, Microsoft listened to all the feedback for years. Remember Resolution Gate, all the stuff with the grass and everything being a meme. Every game basically got a Digital Foundry testing, and PlayStation always got the win because it was a more powerful console. They come out with a more powerful One X, and developers kind of just do this parity thing for the most part. We do have games like, Red Dead Redemption 2 that was 4K on the One X. But then when they launched their new generation console, the most powerful console out of the two, Microsoft still can't get a win because developers are locked into making it exactly the same as the PlayStation version. And I think that is a crappy practice. It really is. Like, if a PlayStation could be capable of one thing, make things available for that. If Xbox is capable of doing X amount of things, or, higher resolution textures or whatever, a better version, they should be allowed to do that. But, like, I think it's shady, and Microsoft needs to look into this because we shouldn't be having games that perform and look the same, or even worse in some instances. Like, if you go out and pay for a $499 Xbox One Series X, you should be getting the best experience possible on console. But you may not be because developers are locked into a contract, and if they're not, I don't like to use the whole lazy dev thing, but they're not using the power there and the overhead when they should. And it's shady. It's really shady. Logan, what do you think about this? Because a lot of it came out today, and obviously some of it in the ABK files.
Yeah, like, I'll preface this by saying I didn't chug a whole liter of Xbox Kool-Aid, but it definitely comes off like people are afraid to upend the balance or feel like they have to tiptoe on eggshells around PlayStation and Jim and leadership, and they don't want to, make Sony mad about this or this. And it's just ridiculous. It's like, unless you sign a contract, which I still think is dumb and gross, but unless you sign a contract, you should make the full use of the power of a console if you can. Otherwise, that's just being lazy. Like, if you can do it and you're not legally required not to. You should, for the betterment of the game and for the players and the experience, you should make use of what you can. And it goes to show what the whole parity thing, the whole subscription services thing, the whole mindset of, oh, we can get the same value in Bungie as all of ABK. Like this delusional, like, ivory tower and this coastal universe mindset of shenanigans and reviews and just everything caters to Sony, and Sony doesn't have to do a daggum thing about it. To just they get their food served to them on a platter, just no questions asked, 5-star course meal without lifting a finger. And Xbox has to fight and claw and bleed and sweat and do everything just to get attention enough to maybe get the same thing. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I think it's very gross how this keeps happening, and like we've talked about this on the channel before. I've made videos about this in the past. Like, I do not think, like, why do we need a mid-gen refresh of a mid-gen upgrade, shall I say, if the developers aren't even allowed to use the power that's there to begin with? Because, like, Microsoft has the most powerful console right now. They aren't allowed to use the power. So what? Sony comes out with a PlayStation 5 Pro next year, and what, a developer's all of a sudden just going to use all of the juice of the Series X because there's a more powerful PlayStation out there? It's just shady. It's really shady, and people need to demand more. Microsoft need to look into this because that can't be legal. Really, that cannot be legal. And if you're getting an Xbox Series X, you should be getting the best experience possible on console. Like, imagine if AMD paid for parity with Nvidia cards. Can you imagine the reaction online? But we don't see that. Xbox has always been fighting this uphill battle. They have been doing it for 20 plus years now. And like, if the situation was on the other foot, we'd know about it. Like, look at the Sony hack today, right? And yesterday, nobody's talking about it.
Crickets,
yeah. I know people will say, "Oh, you're not seeing this stuff in your feed because of who you follow." Look, most of the people I follow, Xbox people, executives, developers, and do you know what happens when when a new game release comes out on another platform? I see clips and videos about like that game. Like when Tears of the Kingdom came out, my feed was filled with Tears of the Kingdom reviews and clips. But when it came to Baldur's Gate releasing on PlayStation 5, I saw no clips. No one posting clips. When this story came out about PlayStation being ransom hacked or whatever you want to call it, nobody's talking about it. Nobody. And then when it comes to this whole developer situation, Sony's allowed. They're allowed to get away with this. And like I said before, Microsoft's been fighting this uphill battle. Like today, right? I might post the tweet in a bit, but I'm loving Starfield. Right? I'm absolutely loving Starfield because I don't get sci-fi RPGs often. I really don't. I whine about how we don't get sci-fi RPGs. Every bloody game we get is a fantasy game, right? It's some variation of fantasy. So when I get a sci-fi game, I cherish it. I want to dive deep into it. But Starfield has actually lived up to my hopes and my expectations and even gone beyond them, right? So about a few hours ago, someone quote tweets me and says, "I'm forcing myself to like this game." And then this person proceeded to continue to comment and reply to my posts where I've enjoyed Starfield. So I went to their profile, and this person spent nothing but the past 2 weeks replying to people's posts that liked Starfield, posting Starfield content. And then it was complaining. And, like, you aren't allowed to like anything about Xbox. Right? It's an industry thing as well. Like, I'm an Xbox-centric content creator. There's bigger people in the industry that mainly cover PlayStation and Nintendo. They don't like to associate themselves with Xbox content creators or anything related to Xbox. And this has been going on for years. Microsoft's been in the console business longer than Sega was. And people like to act like every other second that Microsoft's just going to go, "Oh, okay, let's back out. we're done with the game industry, even though they've invested billions into the game industry. And yes, all that stuff came out about the Microsoft leaks and stuff, but why do we have to acknowledge Microsoft leaks and talk about them, but not the Sony ones? Why do we have to go off everything Phil says, but not everything Jim says, right? Jim Ryan said a few months ago that they will die and not survive without Call of Duty. And then he comes out the other day and says, no, we're going to be fine. We're going to get more value from Bungie. Now, we all know that's not true. Like, Microsoft obviously has more like investment and there's more value in Activision, but like no matter what's happening on Microsoft's side, be it the hardware, games, services, anything, they're looked down upon. There's this double standard feature across the whole industry does not like Microsoft. From fans, content creators, uphill battle, and this goes into the whole game preservation thing. Screw it, I'm going off it. So game preservation popped up last week as a topic on Twitter because Microsoft requires you to connect to the internet to access original Xbox and 360 games. And like Logan, you saw this going down, right?
Yeah, it's more of the same about the whole DRM thing. And look, I'm not a fan of DRM either, but at least you can't with a straight face be truthful and say that Xbox doesn't care about game preservation when they have literally like hundreds of games that they have preserved and enhanced and made playable across original Xbox 360, Xbox One, and Series XS, all on one device. Like that's not a company, taking a token gesture for backwards compatibility or game preservation. That's a company putting its money where its mouth is and making it work, and not charging you for games you already own by doing a quote bare bones shiny coat of paint and selling it for $70 and calling it a remaster or remake.
Yeah, the whole thing just went over the top because like these people that were saying Microsoft doesn't care about game preservation, saying that Microsoft wants to like kill gaming and they are a threat to the gaming industry. Microsoft offers backwards compatibility, but Sony doesn't. They offer backwards compatibility with PlayStation 4 games, and they offer ports of PlayStation 1 games that you can buy as classics, right? They aren't. Look, that's not backwards compatibility. You can't put your PlayStation 1 disc in and then play the game. But it just became a big stink last week that Microsoft doesn't care about game preservation, where they have an entire department and division dedicated to backwards compatibility. And look, I don't want to mention names, but like some people in the game industry in like game and content creator space that I really respected, like I've noticed in the past, have made videos saying like, you can't buy Gears of War 2. There's no game preservation, so like you have to get it on PC via emulation. I just thought, does this person not know about backwards compatibility? Because like, is you needing the internet to play these games the worst thing around? Really? Like, you're complaining on the internet, using the internet, about having to be connected to the internet to play these games. Who cares, right? Can I play my PlayStation Vita games? My PlayStation P games on new PlayStations? No. Can I play my digital PlayStation portable games on PlayStation 5? Nope. I can't do any of that. I have a crusty old PlayStation 3 there, gathering dust. It sounds like a helicarrier from Avengers is about to take off. Like, that is basically my Metal Gear Solid 4 box. And it's old. There's no other option for me to play that game other than on PC through nefarious, things. But, like, the whole game preservation thing, just, like, it really, like, balled up. Like, Microsoft's fighting this uphill battle with everything. There's the parity thing, the whole, like, if Xbox does something, it's bad. If PlayStation does it, it's good. Like, I've talked about this before. Back in, like, 2014, when the Xbox One got the ability to play like digital files, like media files, Kotaku had a picture of a pirate flag, and it said, "Oh, the Xbox One now lets you watch pirated movies." Yet 6 months after that, the same person at Kotaku wrote an article saying, hey, the PlayStation 4 now lets you use it as a media device to play MKV files. And I just thought, wait a minute, what's different here? It's the same story, wrote a different way. And like, people will obviously say I'm wearing a tinfoil hat, right? I can say that, like, I used to be a PlayStation guy before the Xbox came out. Like, I preferred PlayStation. And then when I picked up the oh my god, what the hell? Oh, the Duke.
The Duke.
The Duke. And like, you can feel its own gravitational pull because the controller's that big. Like, I loved the offset sticks. I loved that it was very much a hardcore game and console. I loved the features of it. And like, my preferences changed. But you can tell there's, like, in the game industry, people that range from, I want to say, mid-20s to the mid-40s. Like, you can tell their preferences did not change, right? So it's okay to like PlayStation Online. You can have a picture of Nathan Drake as your profile picture and just hate Xbox all day. You can have your profile picture as Mario and hate on everything else all day. But if you just say you prefer Xbox or cover Xbox, you're an Xbot. You're a fanboy. Like, isn't that kind of sad? Like, Microsoft's been doing this for like 20 plus years now, and we still aren't allowed to be like just part of the conversation. And like, Microsoft's making these pieces of hardware where the developers aren't allowed to utilize the power. It's just ridiculous, and it's going on and on and on, and like, something has to be done about it. It really does, because it's tiring. It really is. But yeah, people need to be a bit more vocal when it comes to this whole parity thing, because we shouldn't be paying the same price for games on a more powerful console that doesn't use the hardware to its fullest. It's just stupid. Speaking of game prices, Logan, did you see about 2 hours ago that head of Capcom thinks that games should be more expensive?
Yeah, I saw that. That was among the interesting things he said this week.
Yeah, so, and I know where he's going with this, because if people have been paying attention to the Apple conference that happened, I think, 2 weeks ago, the new iPhone 15 Pro and M1 chip devices, so, iPads and laptops from Apple, they are going to be getting AAA games. Like, full-on AAA games. Actually, before I continue, I've just realised we're 49 minutes into the show. If you're enjoying it, please like, share, and subscribe. We've had a week off because of the crappy internet, and lately, Google, YouTube, they aren't sharing the video out. It's really annoying. But if you share, it really helps the channel out. If you like, comment, it really helps too. If you want to support the channel, Super Chats are live if you want anything read out or answered. Anyway, Capcom, they said some silly stuff. But I think this has to do with the iPhone more than like the AAA games we buy on console. So the game prices today came out for their mobile games. Sorry, so Resident Evil 8 and Resident Evil 4 Remake are going to the iPhone and M1 devices, and they're going to be $60. $60 for a mobile game. Now, one, I think it's kind of cool that technology is at a point now where we are going to be getting full console games the same day on mobile. Like Assassin's Creed Mirage comes out on consoles and mobile next week. Like, that is crazy. That's absolutely crazy that tech's evolved that far. And I do think that the iPhone being that powerful is a bit of a Trojan horse, or could be, for Apple in the gaming space. I think Microsoft has bought Activision, I think, in a big response to what this phone can do. Not specifically this phone, but where technology's going, because you have these phones that people are on every day for 6 hours, 7 hours, or whatever. And if that phone can also connect to your TV and play AAA games, yes, Microsoft and Sony should be a bit, threatened. But anyway, these games are going to be $60. Look, Logan, I don't know about you, but I think $60 for the same game on mobile just sounds crazy.
Yeah, it sounds bonkers to me. Like, I get it, and if it's technically visually comparable, like okay, but it just to me it just feels maybe it's old school thinking, but it just feels wrong to me for a game that be on phone to be $60. Like I'm used to games being like 20 or 30 at most, and most of them being like 10 or less, like app type games and stuff. So maybe I just haven't wrapped my head fully around modern AAA on a phone for just like natively placed games, but it seems nuts to me, and I just don't see that taking off.
I've talked about this in the past, and I'll be interested what chat thinks. So, this generation, developers have shifted to a $70 pricing structure for a lot of games, and developers want to go higher, right? So, Bandai Namco, they are experimenting with $80 games. So I'm
Good
looking at,
luck with that.
yeah, good luck with that. So I'm looking at the prices right now, and bear in mind that £80 is about, I think that's like $95. It's something like that. It's very close to that. Anyway, so Ni no Kuni 2 Revenant Kingdom Prince's Edition in the US costs $80. $80. It's also on Game Pass, thankfully, but it's also $79.99 in the UK. So they are experimenting with $80 games. EA, they are really wanting to experiment with $80 games when it comes to FIFA, and like how those games are priced with the packs. So like you buy the game and you're instantly shown a page to buy microtransactions. They do the same with Madden, I believe, and I believe 2K are doing the same thing with their basketball game. Developers this generation want to go up another $10. Like, honestly, the move to 70 has made a lot of people here like go, you know what, I'm going to wait for a sale. And whenever a game costs less, people have their eyes on it more. Like Assassin's Creed comes out next week, and I think it's $44.99 in the UK, which that's going to sell like hotcakes here. But like these games charging 70 now, they are wanting 80, and we're going to be, what, 3 years into the generation? Like, I can't see this working out. I 100% believe the reason why Guardians of the Galaxy failed is because of its price. Star Wars Jedi Survivor, even though it launched and outpaced the first game, I think over long term, it's going to sell less than Jedi Fallen Order because it costs more. I think the $70 game is going to basically destroy studios. And $80 games is, in my opinion, it's going to ruin the industry. It really is. Like, $80. Like, if you go to Ni no Kuni 2 on the Xbox store right now in the UK, in the US, like, $80. Like, that's crazy. That's really crazy. Logan, do you think, like, what's your thought on the whole $80 thing? And, like, it's crystal clear that this generation, they are wanting to do it.
I think $80 sounds like an exec's fever pipe dream. That's like insanity. $80 for a standard edition of a game is just it's madness. And like if I was a person who maybe bought one or two games, maybe three or four in a year, $80 wouldn't be as big a deal to me, but it would still be like $80 is that's not nothing. But for as many games as I play and buy in a year, like $80, I mean, my goodness. I mean, you're gonna be putting people living in their cars if you're doing that. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, you know what? I've just been looking at the prices right now. So, Ni no Kuni 2 Revenant Kingdom Prince's Edition on the Nintendo Switch digitally costs $49.99. So, so they want to charge almost double for the Xbox version. Like, actually, I'll see how much it's on PlayStation because this is ridiculous. Like, they are experimenting right now with these prices, and okay, it's $47.99 on the PlayStation. So, like, some of these publishers are experimenting with $70, and I think with mobiles going to be able to play all these games as well, and they are going to be a lower tier, so $60. Like, people need to be more vocal about this stuff. I've whined about game prices before, and I'm going to do it right now. During the Xbox One generation, PlayStation 4, when that generation started in the UK, games went from £37 to 50, right? And I was the only bugger online talking about it. Nobody else was talking about it. People just let it slide. And then throughout the generation, it went up to 55, 56, 60, 65, and this generation basically went 70. And like we're just letting it fly. People aren't making more money to cover that cost. And game development, I've talked about this before. I honestly think game development and the way games are made now, it's just bloated. I'm not talking about the amount of content, but like, do we really need ray tracing in games? I've also talked about this before. I think developers should prioritize visual resolution and frame rate over ray tracing. And that's a 180 from how I used to think a year ago. I used to be like, oh, I can't wait for ray tracing, but the Xbox Series X, can't wait for ray tracing. Ray tracing's nice. If you're not playing Minecraft, I think ray tracing isn't really that impressive. I really don't. I just can't believe developers are wanting to charge this much money. And I honestly, like, Logan, do you think that the $80 price tag might like harm studios?
I think there would be a lot more studios and publisher graveyards if there's an $80 price put out there, especially for studios that are smaller and trying a new idea. Because that, or you're just going to see way less studios try new things and they'll just try to get a license for established IP or get acquired from another studio so that they have a safety net. Because I think if they start pushing $80 tags, like the Call of Duties and the Grand Theft Autos, Halos, God of Wars, the established juggernaut franchises, they can survive that and people will still buy them. But for the general new entrance into the game or for other type titles, I think that's a death sentence, a death mark on a studio and a game for that price.
Like, I just can't see a lot of these studios like making it. But anyway, like, I think people need to be more vocal about it. And like,
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
don't know why Siri's answering everything I say for some reason. Like, I think like going to $80 is just a huge mistake. Like you said, like the big games like Call of Duty, God of War, Halo, all that stuff, they can survive that. But like this generation, every time a £70 game gets announced, I always say like, oh, I'm gonna wait for it. I'm gonna wait for a sale. So like whenever a game isn't £70, more people are excited for it because the price is acceptable. You know. We'll see what happens, but man, like it does not look good for the industry. Excuse me. And you know what? Let's move on to TGS. Now, TGS is a bit of a weird one because, Logan, did you watch the TGS showcase for Microsoft?
I didn't watch it live, but I caught up on post-show stuff and saw what they revealed.
Yeah, so people were really disappointed by it, but I thought they had really good announcements. So, the Ace Attorney trilogy is now on Game Pass. The next Ace Attorney trilogy is coming to Xbox in early 2024, which is really good. The next Yakuza game, Like a Dragon Gaiden, The Man with No Name, is coming to Game Pass day one, which is it's a massive game, that. And, you know, the next Capcom new IP is coming to Game Pass day one. You know, I thought it was a really good TGS. I think the problem is that people went into it thinking we're going to get Final... Like, my feed was filled with Final Fantasy VII Remake. Like, and Pixel remasters. Like, I'll put it like this. I 100% believed that we would see the Pixel remasters there.
Yeah, I did too.
Like Square Enix has said, like they are committing to Xbox to put more Final Fantasy games on the platform. Like, that is literally what they said. So 14's coming. That's coming in early 2024. You know, we know about that. The Pixel remasters I thought was realistic because they're on everything. They're on iPads, iPhone, PlayStation, Switch, PC, bloody Kindle tablets. So Xbox kind of made sense, and that wasn't there. And Final Fantasy VII Remake, like, look, I would love that to come to Xbox. And I've said before, I don't think that's coming to Xbox anytime soon. I think when the third game releases and it gets its final update and it reaches quote-unquote end of life, then it can be ported to Xbox. But until then, I think people getting their hopes up for it be a TGS was a bit much, you know. And I would love to be wrong, right? This is a situation I would love for Square Enix to be like, hey, Jamie, you're wrong. And I'll tell you what, if, hypothetically, Final Fantasy VII Remake does come to Xbox in the next 18 months, right, I will give away multiple copies on the channel. Putting it out there. If it happens and people remember, let me know, and I'll give some copies out. But, like, I don't see that happening anytime soon. Square Enix, they've kind of made some mistakes partnering with Sony, because when it comes to a Japanese, you know, RPG like Final Fantasy VII, people think, okay, well, let's say there's 40 million PlayStations out there. That's 40 million people that's going to buy it. It's like, no. Square Enix have pigeonholed themselves in a small section of that 40 million. Like, most people that buy a PlayStation on Xbox, they play it for FIFA and Call of Duty and Madden. Like, that's their reason to buy them consoles. So, yes, you can call dibs for one copy, okay? Or at least I'll give you a few I'll give you a few tickets in for one. But anyway, we'll come to that problem when we get to it. Look, I think like Square Enix, they've kind of shot themselves in the foot. Every game they've came out with, Western style, over the past 10 years, they've said it's missed sales expectations and all that stuff. Studios have closed down left and right. They've sold studios off, and it seems like no matter how much a game sells, it's not enough. Tomb Raider in 2013 sold, I think, 7.5 million copies, and Square Enix said that was below expectations. Yet, you know, Final Fantasy 16, that sells X amount of million copies, and it's okay. Final Fantasy 7 Remake sold, I think it came up as 6 million. Like, when you sell 6 million copies on an install base of 100 and, let's just say, 30 million devices, like, isn't that a bit of a failure? Like, every time I mention this, there's always one person that gets annoyed saying, oh, if you should buy it. And there's people that basically cover nothing but Square Enix titles. Like, they say, like, Square Enix shouldn't put these games on Xbox because they won't sell. But if we've looked at Sega and look what they're doing with Persona and Yakuza, they are making fan bases. There's a baked-in fan base for Yakuza now on Xbox, right? The way they released the games was smart, and if there's new titles coming out, people will buy them. Persona's the same. Square Enix doesn't have a fan base on Xbox because they're shitty releases. I tried not to swear this episode, but like, Square Enix, they've lost the plot. They need to get a bigger fan base by releasing their games multi-platform. That's just how they're going to make more money. And, excuse me, when it comes to, like, look, if you're listening right now and you listen to an Xbox-centric podcast and you a PlayStation guy or girl, if you buy a PlayStation and you automatically get those games by default, those Final Fantasy games, like, are you really losing out on anything if they go multi-platform? You're still getting the game. And it's why I think why Sony buying Square Enix makes no sense, because the consumer doesn't benefit anything. Like, you're still getting the games by default on the platform. It's just, I don't know, like, Square Enix, they've shot themselves in the foot, in my opinion. And I would love to buy more of their games on Xbox. You know, there's a Final Fantasy IX remake that's apparently going to be shown in the next several months. Is that going to come to Xbox? We don't know. I think the best thing Microsoft could do, and this isn't about Game Pass, I think Microsoft should sign some sort of agreement with Square Enix to get the next decade's worth of Final Fantasy games. Right? Make sure they come to the platform, they give them tech support whenever needed, because other than that, we just don't know. We just don't know. Logan, what do you think? Because like a lot of people were disappointed that it wasn't there, but I thought that was a bit that was people hoping a bit much.
Yeah, honestly, I thought the Final Fantasy VII expectations were hopium. Like, I I was pretty positive that wasn't going to happen. Like, Sony lawyers probably collect royalties every time somebody wishes for a port of that game. Like, they're probably laughing at the bank right now. It's For whatever reason, they have a very good ironclad agreement with Square about the handling of that game and Final Fantasy in general. Like, without seeing the document, we don't know. But I kind of wonder if it's like Final Fantasy titles going forward, like new ones, like for at least a bit, will be first on PlayStation or only on PlayStation. Like maybe the Final Fantasy 14 thing, comes over. It does now because it's something they had been working on previously, but the fact that Crystal, the remasters weren't there and some other stuff, it's like until I see it happening, I'm just not gonna believe we're gonna get any Final Fantasy games on Xbox besides the Final Fantasy 14 thing, unless I see otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's been this theory that the rebirth that comes out in I think it's February, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, that has a quote unquote 3 month exclusivity period before it can go to other platforms. Now, that could just mean PC, or it could mean Switch 2 because the Switch 2 is probably going to be out by then. So, like, I would love to be wrong. Like, please let me be wrong. And plus, people get some free copies of Final Fantasy, but like, I want to play them on my Xbox with achievements with my Xbox controller. And by the time that comes out, there'll be a new Xbox controller. um, but yeah, TGS for me, it was a good one. There was more than usual. We're getting a lot of cool games, there was some more footage shown for the Like a Dragon game that comes out in, I think that's also February, Like a Dragon 8, which looks very good. It's also set in Hawaii, which I can't wait for that one. That's going to be more of a bigger game than the one that comes out in November. But yeah, Yakuza fans, Persona fans, a lot of stuff coming. And apparently, I've heard rumors that Persona 6 is also coming to Xbox. So, like, Sega and Microsoft, they are in a good place right now. At least it looks that way, because all those games are apparently coming to Xbox, which is really good. Anyway, we'll move on. That's enough of me whining about Final Fantasy. You know what? Man, we have almost too many topics here. Okay, let's talk about Logan. ABK, what's going on there? What's happened?
Okay, basically the latest is that it seems like all systems go, and this thing should be done by the 18th of October. It's looking like the latest signal was the cat, the CMA's tribunal that oversees how they do things and is kind of their check and balance, has canceled their hearing that they were going to have in late October in case things went sideways. And the CMA provisionally agreed to the deal and said, we got a few lingering things, but we're talking with them and we'll think we can figure it out. And so, assuming those stay on track and they don't have a complete 180 at the last minute, then it looks like it will finally close and be done. We can celebrate and live free and be merry, and ABK will have come home to Xbox by the 18th of October. And there is this FTC thing that's kind of lingering, but it's an appeal for a injunction to try to stop the merger from occurring. But that kind of becomes useless if it happens after the thing has already been approved and finalized and has happened. You can't put a stop to something and say, wait, we want this not to go through, and it's already gone through. So it's like they can always sue later and try to break it up. which they wouldn't win. But as far as that thing, it becomes useless waste of taxpayer money again, because it's basically like, oh, we're all gathered here today to try to prevent something from happening that has already happened. Congratulations, you're behind the eight ball here. So, in essence, it seems like it's about to be done. They've already had a position open up at Microsoft to oversee ABK integration and some management of that. Of course, after it was someone, snitched and released that information, they went and changed the title and made it sound a little more vague. But in essence, they're operating like ABK is going to be part of them very, very soon. So, hallelujah.
It's been a long 20 months. Thankfully, it's almost done. Like you said, October. It's finally at an end almost. I think like people keep saying the whole monopoly thing. If you look at how big the game industry is, and like Microsoft's always had a close relationship with Activision. The Call of Duty is still going to be on PlayStation. Hell, it's going to go to other streaming services and things like Switch. I assume Switch 2. Activision have already seen the Switch 2. I think like gamers are going to benefit from this. Phil Spencer's recently talked about how he wants to bring back Mech Assault. And, Sarah Bond the other day recognized that there's one for StarCraft content. Maybe it's because all the times I've been port begging for a third-person shooter by the Coalition, but, like, there's so much they could do with those intellectual properties which haven't been touched in years, and that's exciting to people. Does Call of Duty really need to come out every single year? No. Like, look at this year, right? The Call of Duty we're getting this year was actually originally meant to be an expansion, and I think that is a better way to go about Call of Duty. You release a game one year, then the next year you have an expansion pack where you have campaign, multiplayer, co-op stuff, and then release the next Call of Duty game a year later, and have like all those studios that used to make Tony Hawk, the Transformers games, and Singularity, like those development teams should be making their own games. They're capable of it. Like there's still like creative directors and stuff that worked on things like Singularity and Transformers that now make Call of Duty maps. Like that is crazy to me. And then you have the backwards compatibility thing. Like, are we going to see a batch of backwards compatible games? We may do, because remember that team's been quiet for a long time, and there have been rumblings about it. And we could possibly see that. I think October is going to be a really interesting month because people have had pop-ups on Xbox saying that if you buy Call of Duty Black Ops, I think it was Black Ops 2, like there was a Game Pass pop-up or something. So like maybe Microsoft's already preparing on the back end to drop the old Call of Duty games. Now, I don't think you're going to see Call of Duty from 2017 onwards. I don't think you're going to have the past 5 years Call of Duty's games, but there should be some really cool games coming. I'm putting it that way. But yeah, it's almost at an end, thankfully. Then we can stop talking about this and start talking about the games, because they should have a lot more games coming. And I just hope we get Guitar Hero. I really want Guitar Hero to come back. I know Phil Spencer has mentioned that in the past, but yeah, should be good. You know what? Let's talk about, actually, before we get into all the leaks. So Starfield, there's been pandemonium going on. People have lost their minds. Even though IGN gave it a lower score than everyone else, they can't stop talking about Starfield. Same with GameSpot. Like, everything they say has to mention Starfield. Cyberpunk proves that Starfield shit. Crap like that. I promised myself not to swear this week, but like everything is, they bring up Starfield. And like, look, Cyberpunk is having its big celebration right now. The new expansion launched like 24 hours ago. Phantom Liberty. Cyberpunk 2.0 is out, And the sad thing is that everyone's saying this is their redemption arc, whereas the game got fixed last year, right? Logan, I think we talked about this last year as well, that a week before Elden Ring came out, Cyberpunk got its free next-gen upgrade and its fix. The whole game was fixed, right? I've been playing since the next-gen upgrade, and it's played wonderfully, right? No bugs at all, no problems. So, like, they've had, 18 months where the game was fixed, and they had their redemption arc, but no one acknowledged it. In fact, when I talked about Cyberpunk last year, I was accused of being paid by CD Projekt Red for praising the game, even though the game was fixed. But now all of a sudden, we have to talk about Cyberpunk and its redemption story. Well, I hate to burst people's bubble. It was fixed a year ago, and it's been in a great state. It's just got more content now. It's called an expansion. Other games get them. But you have places like GameSpot bringing up Starfield and trying to diss Starfield because of Cyberpunk. It's like, yes, Cyberpunk was in development for years. It was launched in a horrendously buggy state to the point where they had to have a warning on the Xbox store, and it was completely pulled from the PlayStation store. It took 2.5 years to get fixed, and then another year and a half for content to come out to improve the game, and then have a paid expansion come out. And I've praised Cyberpunk, by the way, for the past year and a half. I've praised the game because it's been in an amazing state, because it was fixed. They had their redemption arc. But now that there's this expansion out and there's 2.0, GameSpot saying, hey, Cyberpunk's making me realize how bad Starfield is. It's like, the dunking of Starfield has been incredible, because there's no game like Starfield. The people will say No Man's Sky. I've played No Man's Sky. Did 2 different games. One's a survival game, one's an RPG. But now people are doing these comparisons between Cyberpunk and Starfield, and it's like, it's really annoying. Like, surely we all notice this. Like, Logan, you notice this, right? Like, it's obvious what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, rents do. Or maybe it's a bad financial quarter for some places, and they're having to prop up those rookie numbers because, like, they are engagement farming like psychopaths. It is insane. Keep seeing the same post, like, posted 10 different times, 10 different ways, but it's the same article or same point. Whether it's a Series S is a potato, or Starfield is this, Starfield is that. This is why this is better than Starfield. Did you know Starfield lied about this? Did you know Starfield is a colossal disappointment? Starfield can't save Xbox. Starfield is niche. It's just like, oh my word. Like, you give it a horrible score, yet it's all you bloody talk about. It's like, how sad is that? If you say you hate something so much, yet you have to talk about it constantly, you must be miserable. You almost feel bad. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, like every article has to mention Starfield. GameSpot, people have done collages of, like, them put out a tweet that says, we give Starfield a 7 out of 10. It's like,
oh yeah, that was such a cringe.
That's like, we get it, right? And, like, look, Starfield, in my opinion, is incredible, but it has issues. It really does. But guess what? I've never played a game that doesn't have issues. In fact, every game I've gave a 10 out of 10 has had issues. I'll go over them right now just to prove my point. And I haven't gave Starfield a score yet, but I'm just going to give people a baseline. So every game I've ever gave a 10 out of 10 has issues, but they're still a 10. Mass Effect 2. Borderline perfect. The main storyline is really short. The Witcher 3. Buggy, and there's too much side content when it comes to mystery, like, places, the places with the question marks, and there's not enough, how should I say it, discoverability in the open world. It's all repetitive content. But to me, it's a 10. Red Dead Redemption 2. It has a slow beginning, and it's hard to earn money early on, and people don't bring up hunting because you need good weapons to do the best hunting in that game. But earning money early on is difficult and it's slow. But it's a masterpiece in my opinion. Elden Ring, another 10 out of 10. The game does not direct you in any way when it comes to side quests. In fact, you can miss out some major story points just by not discovering an NPC out in the wild. Right? Again, 10 out of 10. Star Wars Jedi Survivor. I gave that a 10 out of 10. It improved in every aspect of the first game. literally every aspect. So I had to give it a 10. But guess what? I thought it was still a short game. It's not really a short game, but I think it's because I enjoyed it so much that I wanted more. But every game I've ever gave a 10 out of 10 has issues. No game is perfect. People can say every game is perfect, but they aren't. But when I look at Starfield, it's like, I don't want to play anything else. I haven't played anything else. And I think I may have like obsessive compulsive disorder or something because I normally hop from game to game. But with Starfield, I stay on that game for hours. It's rare for me to do that. And like when Starfield was being marketed, like normally with marketing, we see stuff that we don't see in the game. We get promised things that aren't in the game. Do you know everything we've seen in Starfield trailers and gameplay segments? It's literally in the game. They have not been misleading about anything. You can literally fly to the planets, but it takes too long. Why would you want to do that? That's what's boring about Elite Dangerous. You can spend upwards of like half an hour just traveling, sitting there, not doing nothing. It's monotonous and boring. So why do it? And like Starfield is great. My biggest thing with Bethesda games is I think the combat's always been bad. But in this game, the combat is arguably its best factor. On foot combat with guns and melee weapons, great. Space combat with spaceships, great. Spaceships fly completely differently depending on how you spec them out and how much mass they have. Ships actually have weight. Like everything about that game that I've played so far is great. It's not perfect though. And the whole comparison to Cyberpunk thing just like really annoys me because that game's been dunked on non-stop for 3 years. And now people want to act like it's the best thing ever, even though it was fixed a year ago. It's extremely misleading. And it kind of just goes to show that maybe a year ago developers didn't do any research. They didn't cover the next-gen upgrade. They didn't talk about the fixes. It's just now because of, Starfield, we have to do a comparison. It's like they're both first person, they're both RPGs, but you can't really compare the two. And yeah, it's just weird. This keeps happening. And guess what? We're gonna see this with every upcoming Xbox exclusive. So when Hellblade comes out in 2024, we're gonna see some comparison to probably God of War or some other third person, adventure game. When Avowed comes out, we're gonna see that compared to every other fantasy game. And like I said, Microsoft's fighting this uphill battle, and like Starfield, for some reason, just like people will mention other games IGN's reviewed in the past, like Forza and Forza and Grounded, and I think they gave the Master Chief Collection a good score in the end. But like the different thing about Starfield is it's a tentpole game, a new IP tentpole game. It's the game people have had their eyes on for years now because the game was announced in, I think, 2017. And, like, that was basically going to be Bethesda's magnum opus when it comes to RPGs. And to me, it is. And I say that as someone that I adore Fallout 3. Fallout 3 is one of my favorite games of all time. And I have to say right now, I honestly think that Starfield may actually be better than Fallout 3. And to me, that's saying a lot. Logan, have you got anything else to say on the topic before I move on?
No, just reiterating what you said, and that especially when it comes to certain scores you see out there, and like how criteria used for one score, if you reflect it and compare it to that same criteria that was used by them for other games, and it just doesn't add up, and then the blatant review bombing you see, like, I don't care if it's a Nintendo game, Xbox game, PlayStation game, iPhone game, whatever. I think review bombing, just because it's not on your platform of choice, is just garbage, like, mentality. Like, I get it when people review bomb on Steam or something to try to get the developer's attention to fix some bugs or issues or something, going like, hey, this game is literally unplayable right now, or where's this thing you promised that would be in the game, it's not here, or this game keeps crashing, or, whatever. and then you update it once it's fixed, and you go, see, game's great, it's been fixed, problem solved. But the whole review bombing, because it's like Starfield isn't on PlayStation, so it's garbage, and I must hold Bethesda accountable for their sins, is just ridiculous.
Yeah, and you know, when it comes to review bombing, I think in general that is just stupid. There's a tweet that's going around on Twitter at the minute of someone bought the game, left a negative review, refunded it, bought it again, left another review, and then refunded it. And it's like, people have such a look. I'm gonna admit it. Like, I try not to swear, say any like lewd on the channel. People have a massive hate boner for the game, right? People want to hate that game so much. Like, if you look at me, like, people want to say I'm a fanboy. If you go to my channel, look at anything I've said about any like Sony game. Like, I don't crap on Sony games. Like, a game may not be for me, but if it's not for me, I'm not going to talk about it, right? And too many people are obsessed with this game. And honestly, it does come across as jealousy. It really does. Anyway, excuse me. You know, before we get into the main topic, all the leaks, the juicy stuff, if you enjoyed the channel, please hit like, share, and subscribe. It really helps the channel out. Again, Ubisoft, did I say Ubisoft? YouTube does not share things out, especially if you have a week off from streaming because of the internet. Anyway, sharing it out, commenting, liking, really helps the channel out. If you want to support the channel via super chats, want anything answered, all that stuff's good and appreciated. So, Logan, Microsoft had a massive info dump, and in the UK, it happened at 6 in the morning. So, like, I got an alert on my phone saying, like, there's a big Microsoft leak, and I was like, I need to tweet about this. So, yeah, apparently some documents got mixed up, and basically Microsoft's plans over the next year and a half, basically leaked online. Everything from hardware to games. We'll get the hardware out of the way first because I think the games are more interesting. So, excuse me. PlayStation obviously rumored to come out with a PlayStation 5 Pro and a discless version with an attachable disc drive. But it turns out Microsoft come out with a new console next year, and it's an Xbox Series X digital edition. And there's been pandemonium because of this. That's how the game preservation topic came up, even though Sony already has a digital-only PlayStation. But it's evil if Microsoft do it. Anyway, it's going to have USB-C on the front for, you know, power charging and all that stuff. Basically, a cylinder-shaped Xbox Series X, and it's going to have 2 terabytes of storage. Microsoft has said they don't want to do a mid-generation upgrade. I've said I don't think there's any point, you know. What are you going to put on the box? It's going to be 4K. It's going to be 120 FPS. The boxes we have right now bloody have 8K on the front, right? So what they're going to market? Anyway, that's coming next year. We're also getting a new controller that apparently has the exact same shape as the one we have now. It's also going to have an accelerometer, so, you know, your gyro aiming and all that stuff. It's going to have increased haptics, whatever. It's going to have this is the smallest detail, which interested me, by the way. It's going to have lift to wake. That actually got me excited, because sometimes the controller can turn off if you're doing something, and having the controller turn on by lifting it, I love that idea. I really do. It's going to have, you know, increased wireless performance, direct connection to the internet, so kind of like what the Stadia controller did. So basically taking aspects about other controllers that people like now and putting them in the current controller. Honestly, as long as it doesn't have the similar triggers as the PlayStation controller, I'm good with it. You know, I think it's cool. Again, lift to wake and gyro aiming. You can probably use gyro with racing games. It's cool. It's cool stuff. I do think this, though. I think that the pandemonium over Microsoft wanting to do a digital option was just painfully obvious, where people's allegiances lie. Like, in the bloody gaming space where there shouldn't be one, but, like, PlayStation launched a digital-only PlayStation 3 years ago, and it's fine. But Microsoft wants to do a digital edition 3 years later, and it's the worst thing in the universe. Logan, what do you think of all that? Plus the hardware in general and the controller.
Yeah, I felt like this was coming eventually. That they would make a digital Series X just as another market for people because there is an interest in that, and it would be something that'd be a little bit less than the Series X, the other one, and it would just be yet another model for people to have and more options. So I totally support that. Um, the controller sounds cool to me. I especially like the lift up to start. That sounds great because sometimes you set your controller off to the side while you're reading something or whatever, and then you have to go and get it and re-log it in and all that. And this just sounds way easier, more streamlined. And I like the idea of being able to add different features to it, like the gyroscopic controls and haptics. And as far as the outcry, I mean, it's totally expected. It's what they do at this point. It's like anything and everything that could possibly be good for one is considered trash if the other does it. And the fact is, like, Special Nick and I think others probably as well have even pointed out that a disk drive, external disk drive, would probably be something that they would make as an add-on or sell for people down the line if they wanted that you could plug into one of these to where if you have older games like a 360 or an original Xbox game that's only available on disc, you can still play it and access your library. Like, I think this is just about options. I do not think this is the final draw, line in the sand. We are done with physical. To heck with physical games. We're only digital. If you don't like it, then there's a different platform for you. Like, I do not think this is some grandstanding final stand moment for people.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the detachable disk drive, like they can do an external one, and like I've said for the past several months, like I think PlayStation doing an external hard drive, disk drive is actually a smart move because that way you only have to make one like SKU, and then the other thing being an accessory. So to me, like it makes sense. I can't see Microsoft doing completely away with discs simply because they have access to backwards compatibility with 3 previous generations. So for Microsoft, it makes even less sense to go fully digital. And like, look, you can get USB Blu-ray drives right now. So like, I think people's overreaction was, let's face it, was forced. But I'm going over the details of the controller right now, and it actually has more features than I remember. So it has a rechargeable and swappable battery. So I think it's going to be like the plain charge kit controller battery. It's going to be made out of recycled materials and less resin. That's always good. I'm good for helping the environment. Easier repair and disassembly, which is great. These are actually really cool features. New modular thumbsticks. Now, if you've played games most of your life, like me, you'll know that you do get stick drift every so often. So the Switch controllers, the PlayStation controllers, basically, if it's a controller that exists, it will get stick drift at some point because the way they made, like there is a technology out there called Hall effect, and basically those do never get drift, but they cost money. But then moving to a modular option, I'm guessing that you're gonna be able to buy Hall effect sticks to put in this controller as an option. Just putting it out there. But yeah, continued build improvements. Same ergonomics as the current controller, which is great. Quieter buttons. Now, to me, I've never really noticed the loudness of the buttons, but people have told me over the past 3 years that the buttons are loud. Like, Logan, do you, like, not that it's a problem, but do you think that the buttons are loud? Because I've always got a headset on.
I generally play without a headset, so I do notice it, especially if you're in a button mashing session or if it's a game where I'm constantly having to hit a shoulder button to reload or push on the stick to melee or something like that. Like, those sounds do add up after a while, but It's not the worst thing, and I kind of tune it out. But when you first start in on it, yeah, it is noticeably loud.
I'm pressing the buttons on my controller right now. Yeah, it's kind of loud, but hey, if it feels the same, I'm all for it. The controller's white and black. It actually looks like it's wearing a pair of trousers. Um, that's a design choice, I guess. But hey, whatever. Basically keeps everything I like about the current controller, which hey, I'm all for. I've been saying for a few years that Microsoft should put gyro in the controller. Those like, little tiny accelerometers don't actually cost much to make. And you know what? Let's get onto all the games because a lot of games were leaked in that. Now Phil Spencer has said that things have changed since this like leak list, and thing with the hardware and all that stuff. So like all these things are technically 2 year old, but a lot of these things kind of line up with things that Bethesda said in the past. So anyway, let's get the hardware out of the way. So Indiana Jones could be coming out next year. Now, that doesn't really surprise me. You have to bear in mind, we have had a pandemic since this list was initially started. But anyway, a lot of these games could still come out. So anyway, Indiana Jones could come out next year. We don't know what that game's like. With it being machine games, I think it's going to be good. Machine games do not disappoint. The Oblivion remaster. Now, this has been listed as a remake multiple times in different documents. So it's either a remaster or a remake. Who knows? But there's a different. Logan, can you remember the name of the team that leaked a while ago? Was it Virtuos that are making it?
I believe so. I believe it's the guys who are doing the Metal Gear 3 remaster, if
That's
I'm not
it.
mistaken.
Yeah. But hey, that could come next year. If you look at Microsoft's lineup for next year, they have Avowed, Hellblade 2, shall I say, Flight Simulator 2024, and Towerborn. Well, we could potentially see Oblivion Remaster, Indiana Jones as well. Like, it's getting to the point now where Microsoft probably have that many games in development, plus smaller titles we don't know about. Because bear in mind, these games, it's just Bethesda. It's not Xbox Game Studio titles. So there's more games coming that are on this list. So there's so many games coming, which just goes to show how big of an investment Microsoft made. If you go back 5 years ago, when they just purchased, Playground Games, Ninja Theory, Compulsion, all that stuff, like people wondered, like, when are these games going to come? Well, we're finally there, But there's other games in this list as well. I should say Starfield DLC. We all know about that. That's called Shattered Space. Doom Year Zero and Doom Year Zero DLC. That sounds like a prequel. I think a lot of people are going to be hyped for that. Although id have said they are making something new, so maybe this is made by a different publisher. I should say a different developer. It could be Project Kestrel. Nothing really known about it. A new Elder Scrolls expansion. That shouldn't surprise anyone. Project Platinum. People have thought that's about Platinum Games. I don't really believe that, but hey, it could be. You never know. Elder Scrolls 6, which here it is a year over 2024. So, but Microsoft have said in documents it's a 2026 game. If you think about it, that's not actually that far away. We're almost in 2024. And plus, these games take a long time to make. They've entered full production now. It's going to be the biggest, single planet game to date. But yeah, what other games is there? Oh, Project Kestrel expansion, a new licensed IP game. I'd be shocked, Logan, when you hear licensed IP game and this is Bethesda. I 100% believe that's Star Wars.
I 100% agree because Todd's shelf isn't as famous as Phil's shelf. But if you go back and look at not long after they were acquired by Xbox and a presser he did at his thing, he had the Ark of the Covenant on his shelf, Tomb Raider. I mean, sorry, Indiana Jones. And then he had some Star Wars stuff up there. And apparently they're working on another established IP. Disney umbrella. Star Wars fits the mold. They're excellent RPGs, excellent at space. Put two and two together, I think it's Star Wars.
Yeah, like I'll make a hat made of cheese and eat it on camera if it's not Star Wars. Like it probably is Star Wars. Either way, I win. Um, Next up we have Project Kestrel expansion. This is probably a single player project. Fallout 3 remaster. It's also been listed as a remake. So who knows what it'll be? But hey, I love Fallout 3, and the best part is right. Those games are backwards compatible. So if you want to play the original ones, you can. Fallout 3 is 4K 60 right now. So is Oblivion, actually. I'm going to go absolutely nuts when those games release because I love those games. Another Elder Scrolls Online expansion, Ghostwire Tokyo sequel, which I'm sure people are happy about that. Just thinking about what they could do by the time that comes out. Dishonored 3. And Doom Year Zero DLC. So that's a lot of games coming. And like I said, that's just Bethesda. We still don't know when Clockwork Revolution's coming out, where, to me, that game looked finished, or at least close to it. Fable is apparently in a playable state. So, like, after years of this whole, Xbox only has Halo, Gears, Forza, Microsoft's at a point now where they're going to have so many games to release where their whole release one AAA game a quarter, they could potentially release two games a quarter, a AAA game and a remaster. But yeah, like Microsoft, they came a long way. If you go back to this time last generation, like 2015, Microsoft was actually in a really bad place. They had very few studios. They just bought the Gears IP. They had the Coalition, Turn 10, 343, and I believe that's it because Lionhead got shut down. But like, you have things like Hi-Fi Rush, which was announced out of nowhere, a Japanese game, and it was shadow dropped the same day it was announced. I see these leaks and I look at Microsoft's like roadmap. You have to realize Microsoft, and people might be surprised to hear this, Microsoft has never had a roadmap. Ever. They've always had so few studios in IP that they can't have a roadmap. They always used to rely on secondary studios. So that's why you had the problems with Scalebound. That's why they had Recore and things like Crackdown. These studios that made games for them which they didn't own. And now they're at the point now where they own, like when Activision comes into the whole thing, they're going to own over 35 studios. Like, it's crazy. But without Activision already, they're going to have potentially 4 to 6 games a year. Like, that's crazy. Like, Logan, I'm excited because, again, I get a crap load of RPGs. And Microsoft's also going to make an investment into Japanese games as well. AAA Japanese games, which just came out yesterday, by the way, I believe. I think Idle Sloth on Twitter posted about that. Like, Phil Spencer confirms Lost Odyssey size AAA development.
Yeah, the future of Xbox has never been brighter, especially with ABK. ABK wasn't necessary, but ABK is like putting nitrous in the car and taking off like Fast and the Furious head start. It is just, this is going to be just amazing. The Bethesda purchase continues to look more and more like one of the bargains of the century in media. It's insane how much value that they're bringing. Like, this list alone is just incredible, even without Elder Scrolls 6, which we know is coming eventually. But even without that, that list is awesome. Like, every single one of the titles on that list is something I want day one. The commitment to more Japanese games, the commitment to more first party investment, and outside of Xbox investment for games to come to the platform is just tremendous news. The fact that he said they're all in on Tango and they're going to really, really, really pour resources into that studio. The fact that, ABK is coming, and that they have all these IP that they want to revisit. You know, you've got Tony Hawk, you've got Guitar Hero, you've got Prototype, you've got Singularity, you've got Hexen, you've got Pitfall, you've got StarCraft. I mean, Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, it's Skylanders. It's like there's so many. And then that's on top of their already established games. Halo has finally hit Infinite has finally hit its legs and stride right now. It's doing phenomenal. The current event is just doing so well, and so many people are returning to the game. Even some of these content creators who famously said they were done with it and would never come
Yeah,
back.
I saw that.
Lo and behold, they've done the walk of shame back to the Xbox to play Halo Infinite again. So yeah, I noticed that. Um, so all in all, it's just glorious times, and I can't wait, man. I'm just so very, very happy.
Yeah, I mean, like we could all say that, like, especially someone that covers Xbox, like on my channel, like Xbox for the longest time, there was not much to talk about. Like, it was always bad stuff, you know, the cancellation of Scalebound, the how Crackdown wasn't the game it was really promised to be, you know, all that stuff. Studios being shutting down, like people can hate on Starfield as much as they want, but everything coming out about Xbox right now is actually really good news. You know, the controller having lift to wake sounds like a small feature, but I love the fact that mobile phones do that. Right, the fact that the controller's going to do that, great for me, handy, just a little quality of life thing. But like the game's coming, like I've been saying that Microsoft, and this is one of Sony's strong suits, is that they can pad their AAA lineup with remasters or remakes. And I've been saying Microsoft should do that as well, because you have access to these games via backwards compatibility, so you're not really forced to buy them to experience it. It's just an option. You could do that already with the first Gears game. You can get the original from 2006, and you know the one from 2015. Everyone wins in this scenario. Microsoft have a crap ton of games coming, to the point where they probably gonna have to sit down and just figure out what games come out what month. Like on the channel, if people don't know, I make a video every month of the 10 biggest games coming to the Xbox that month. Have another video coming out this week about October. But it's going to get to the point where every single month's going to have Xbox exclusives in, which is crazy to think, because 5 years ago they weren't in this position, which is good to hear. I just think, like, you know, Microsoft had a horrible 2022. They didn't have, like, even Phil Spencer said, and the list leaks, 2022, all their major games got moved, right? Starfield got pushed to this year. Redfall got pushed to this year. Their partnered titles got pushed out of 2022, such as Atomic Heart, Stalker 2, and a bunch of other, like, you know, big, like, Game Pass releases. They all got pushed out of the year. So, like, last year, Microsoft had partners with Squanch Games with, you know, a High on Life. I loved that game, by the way. And they had Pentiment. 2022 was an extremely weak year for Microsoft, but clearly that was a one-off because of the pandemic, people having to work from home, all that stuff. And yeah, times have changed. Microsoft's in a good spot, which is great. I think that, you know, 2023 for Xbox, people can look down on Redfall and say it was a bad game. They wanted to fix it. They wanted to put it in a great state, which is good. But like 2023 is going to go down as a great year for Xbox. 2024, I think, is going to be the best year yet. Like, it's going to be amazing for them, and just going forward. Because remember, Microsoft launched this new next gen console without really any big exclusives, because they didn't have the studios in the right position due to the, you know, pandemic and all that stuff. Halo was pushed out of the year, but that's not going to happen this time around. We're potentially going to see Elder Scrolls 6 launch as a next gen game. Think about it. That's crazy. Logan, have you got anything else to say on the topic before we close out the show?
Oh, a few things. Like, Hellblade 2 apparently is playable right now. Like, Ninja Theory tweeted out that they had a dev session where the whole studio got together and did a playthrough. That's really positive for its development and its cycle. Can't wait for that game. Like, that's one of my most anticipated games, I think, for next year, for sure. Can't wait for that one. and Avowed whenever it comes out, like that's gonna be killer, and Outer Worlds 2, and just like, man, as an RPG and action game junkie, I'm just like, Xbox is just makes me giddy for those genres going forward. Not they're no longer the dude bro shooter racer box only. Like they have expanded and they've gone to some of my favorite genres, and it's very very good.
You know, as we were going over all those games, I just forgot there's two more exclusives. So Gears 6. Now we don't know much about it, but it kind of got let slip today where Ice-T was in an interview and he was talking about how he already has a song produced for Gears. So that's new. So he's potentially leaked Gears 6, which hell, I love Gears. I want a new Gears game soon. And yeah, the Kojima game, Kojima Productions. Microsoft have been over there for TGS doing all these interviews and stuff, and they are visiting Kojima Productions. They did that today. Bunch of stuff on social media. We don't know what type of game it is. We just know that it's going to be innovative and use the cloud in some way. Which, I mean, that could be anything. It's Kojima, right? It's going to be crazy what that game is, right? Like if you've played Metal Gear Solid, his ideas just are out there, right? They may not make sense, but they're bloody good. It's a good place for Microsoft. And again, the fact that he confirmed a AAA investment into Japanese games, that's going to make all the Lost Odyssey 2, port beggars out there like me, very happy. We could potentially see Lost Odyssey 2, which is really cool. But yeah, good things are coming to Microsoft, and that's what's most important. But anyway, we're going to close out the show. Everyone in chat's been amazing this week. Again, last week we didn't have a show because Sky Internet, Sky Broadband went down countrywide due to wind. I didn't even think that could happen. We don't have tornadoes here or hurricanes. We have wind and a bit rain and the occasional angry squirrel. Anyway, everyone in chat, like I said, it's been awesome. This is the best chat. No one argues. It's always chill. We'll be back at the same time next week, and I have a video coming out hopefully tomorrow. Games coming out in October, and a few other surprises coming out. I also have a video coming out next week about a crap ton of Xbox games coming, some of which I haven't mentioned on the show. Should be interesting. Anyway, we'll be back this time next week. We are out. Peace, everybody. And we are